Is it refresh? All right, we are live. Just give a minute or so, and then we'll. All right, this should be good. Hello, everyone. I'm David Prather, Vice President of the ARMA Metro New York City, Long Island chapter. This session is Deep Content Awareness, a modern, agile-enabled data management, security, and privacy fusion framework. And it will be presented by Richard Davis. Richard is an e-discovery, cybersecurity, and data privacy subject matter expert, and he has over 30 years of experience running e-discovery, cybersecurity operations at major law firms and corporations. He holds a Juris Doctorate from the Pace University School of Law and also has numerous IT and cybersecurity certifications. He is the author of the Legal Data Lifecycle Management and Deep Content Awareness Framework. He is also a U.S. Army veteran, airborne. And I could go on and on and on if I listed all of Richard's credentials and his relevant experience and discuss the impacts he's made, not only here in the U.S., but also around the world. Well, he wouldn't have time to finish his presentation. So just check out the remainder of his biography in the Socio app. Before I turn it over to Richard, I'd just like to give a special thanks to FileTrail for sponsoring today's session. Be sure to visit FileTrail to learn more about their records management, matter management, and governance solutions. So, over to you, Richard.
Great, thank you so much, David. I really appreciate the opportunity to present to ARMA. Really appreciate the opportunity to connect with my distinguished colleagues. I've been in the New York area for quite some time, and I'm really excited about the opportunity to talk about some of the things that impact the records management discipline, and definitely very excited about the opportunity to chat about the framework that I've put together that I think helps articulate very succinctly the not just the disciplines that are converging, but also some of the technologies and concerns and how that's going to impact the field of records management. So with that, I will go ahead and get started with the presentation. So I'm going to give an overview of deep content awareness. It's pretty much a loose framework that helps individuals and organizations synthesize certain key aspects of infrastructure, process, and within the environment that they're operating. I'm going to talk a little bit about machine learning. I'm going to talk a little bit about the various learning models, and then I'll get into some of the implications of AI on records management. I'm pretty sure many of you have been following recent innovations and developments with respect to different types of AI that are used in the information governance data classification space. I'll speak very specifically about the convergence of RIM and e-discovery and cybersecurity. And the rationale there is to really show the interdependence of these disciplines on one another and the portability of skill sets between those various disciplines. Then I'll touch on the future of records management, and then I'll conclude. So with that, I will move forward. We've already talked about who I am. I'm not going to bore you any further. Okay, so this particular slide here, and it didn't build out, but that's okay. This particular slide here speaks to the environment in which we operate. And what I'm going to do is draw your attention to the visual on the right side, right? Every organization has technology, people, processes, and all of those things work within the culture. And in the middle of the graphic on the right-hand side, you'll see the people, process, technology, and culture Venn diagram. And together, people, technology, and processes within a particular organizational culture will inform the manner in which the organization engages in governance for its various functions. The blue circle, the aqua, the blue circle on the outer border here, environmental factors, external environmental factors. Those are the environmental factors that organizations have the least influence over, right? Those are organizational factors, or I should say, external factors such as your regulatory environment, your threat landscape. These are all things that influence how the organization needs to stand up various initiatives and organize their functions in order to operate, right? So, all organizations, or I should say, a great many organizations today, are subject to very rigorous data privacy regulations. Um, Large organizations today are subject to a relentless onslaught of cyber attacks or attempted cyber attacks. Um, there are other factors such as the economic environment. We can talk about, debt ceiling issues. We can talk about, various other competitive factors. Those things all influence the IT strategies. They all influence the legal approaches to dealing with some of the challenges. And of course, all of these functions, IT, RIM, and legal, they are typically called cost centers that support the business, which is typically the profit center. Um, and then within that environment, you've got various activities, right? In the gray circle, in the gray ring, just outside of the people, technology, and process Venn diagram, we've got functions such as cybersecurity, e-discovery, governance, regulatory and compliance, M&A activity, business intelligence. We can actually take this kind of model and plug and play with different functions, different initiatives, different environmental factors. And this model kind of helps sort of frame out those key areas where organizations need to align. Um, and so the interplay between these organizations, particularly as it relates to functions that are more data centric, is very, very, very apparent. And the objectives here, obviously, when it comes to any data driven initiative, is to obtain knowledge in a much faster fashion, time value of information. We want to reduce data. Data proliferation is something that we're constantly contending with, has lots and lots of implications, not just from a storage perspective, but also how do you rationalize it? How do you mine the data? How do you surface the things that are important to the organization? And then obviously we want to do more with less. So the competence level of the resources, the individuals, the capabilities, we're all constantly pushing the boundaries there. And we want to achieve all of these objectives with less risk. And so I've touched on a number of things here, particularly the external variables. The last thing I wanted to really highlight is this thing called the Quantum Menace. It sounds like it's another prequel of Star Wars or something, but the practical reality is that NIST and CISA have been sounding the alarm for some time now. They've been telling the American infrastructure, the 15 areas of critical infrastructure, you must do more to ensure that the encryption schemes that you have for your data at rest and your data in flight are updated. And so NIST has essentially selected a number of algorithms that they feel will help organizations become quantum resistant. So there's a post-quantum cryptography initiative that CISA has been pushing. CISA and NIST have been pushing for some time now. And the reason for this is that the RSA, AES algorithms that are used to secure data at rest and in flight will be easily deprecated when the quantum compute capability to decrypt data becomes viable. right? And there's a race, there's an arms race that is going on right now between nation states, between the U.S., uh, EU countries, the Russians, the North Koreans, China. There's a race to get a viable quantum computing capability. And whatever nation gets that capability first will have a significant strategic and tactical advantage as it relates to being able to manage data. And should that capability be used in a malicious way, the consequences will be very, very severe. So hold that thought. Just make a note about that, and make sure you visit the CISA and NIST sites and look up post quantum cryptography readiness. Okay, moving on to the next slide here. Okay, let's see. All right, so I'm now going to talk a little bit about AI, right? And I think it's important to mention the fact there's lots of different types of AI that's out there. And I did use a different set of bullets to reflect the AI that I think is most relevant for data management, information management. So narrow AI, which is the first type of AI that we have listed at the very top here. Though that's the kind of AI that you'll see in chatbots, right? Very specific set of tasks, very narrow set of questions that can be asked and answered. And so that's the most probably prevalent form that you'll see when you go to a website. You get a little chatbot pop up and say, "How can I help you today? My name is so and so," and you can interact with it in a limited fashion. Then we have general AI, right? Artificial general intelligence. And this is where we're starting to get a little bit more sophisticated in terms of the algorithms and the learning models that can be deployed. And then the next type of AI is machine learning AI, right? And many of us who've been in records management or in e-discovery or in any kind of M&A type scenario where we have to identify records and migrate records, et cetera, may have used different types of machine learning to essentially understand data. Let's say you have multiple SharePoint sites and you don't know what's there. You can use unsupervised machine learning capabilities to help you cluster the data to be able to figure out, what's there without ever having seen the data set before. Then we have deep learning capabilities. And those capabilities are beginning to move into areas of true human-like interaction. And this is a very, very fascinating field. And then we have natural language processing. And there are lots of tools out there that provide some natural language processing capability. I took a snippet of a chat GPT interaction that I had. And what I wanted to do was I wanted to test GTP's capability as it relates to being able to draft documents, legal documents. One of the luminaries in the e-discovery field, I believe it was Ralph Losey, who posted the other day. He posted something about, AI not really, being up to muster to really take larger documents and analyze them or draft them or opine on them, et cetera, et cetera. And so I gave ChatGPT a small task. I told ChatGPT, I want you to draft a preservation order, right? Litigation preservation order, and came back and did a pretty darn good job of drafting a preservation order. I've actually done quite a bit of testing just for my own edification to see how effective the responses are, and I am pretty impressed. I've been pretty impressed by what I've seen. So this example that I have here on screen is one that I could actually regenerate several times for those of you who have never used ChatGPT. Basically, it allows you to accept a response, or go back and bring me something else, right? This was a pretty good example of what I would call basic AI capability can do. And the more sophisticated models will far surpass what we have today. And what we have today is pretty impressive. Okay, moving on to the next slide. This slide is kind of busy. When I had it in PowerPoint, it actually built out, so it wouldn't just hit you all at once. So I'll walk you through the slide, right? So in the top right hand corner of the slide, there's a reference to the number of jobs that are expected to be disrupted by AI. And I found it to be very interesting and very relevant, because as you look at the chart to the left of the top right quadrant, narrative indicating that 25% of jobs are set to be disrupted in the next 5 years, what you'll see if you look at the chart and you look at some of the key areas, and I highlighted a couple of areas, office and administrative support, and legal. Those are the two areas that are predicted to be most impacted by the burgeoning effect of intelligent machines. They are predicting that there will be a significant shift. I say shift because I'm hoping that those folks who are in certain areas that are identified as being impacted by AI can essentially transform themselves, and reinvent themselves in other areas. But you can see that legal, office support, those are areas that are most hit. We have life sciences, business, financial operations. It's just amazing. And as the CISO of a company, I'm a CISO of a company that is heavily, heavily vested in AI and distributed ledger technology. I can see what's coming down the pike in terms of making these machines even faster and more powerful, because that's a core part of what we do at Queros. If we look at Exhibit 8, right? Exhibit 8 essentially highlights two key areas, and the bars that you see in Exhibit 8, which is at the bottom right corner of the screen, that those bars reflect, especially the gray area, that's the area of likely replacement, right, of a role with AI. So again, just as we saw in Exhibit 5, office and administrative, there's a high likelihood of replacement of AI, of individuals with AI, and then in the legal area as well. So those two areas are areas that, if you're in those fields, it's really important to look at tangential skill sets that can extend your sort of viability from a career perspective in those areas. And in organizations I've either worked in or consulted with, records and information management typically falls under legal, and in some instances IT, or in some instances there's a bifurcated reporting structure. And as we all well know, the ability to use some of these AI engines to classify millions and millions and millions of records and align them with records categories and record series in an automated fashion, those capabilities exist today. Okay, I will move to the next slide. Okay, so this slide should be pretty familiar to everybody, right? It focuses on the principles, the ARMA principles. And what I've done is I've grouped the principles into three groups, and it's not a hierarchical grouping. It's just a grouping, or it's a flat sort of horizontal grouping. And group one, and I group them because of the association of accountability, transparency, and integrity. I grouped them because of that, right? So if you look at accountability as one of the principles where there's a custodial system of data ownership, um, and transparency and integrity, we're talking about data provenance and lineage, right? Being able to ascertain who, what, when touched information, generated the information, is accountable, responsible, informed, etc. Right? Um, and then I have another grouping called G2, protection and availability. Right? When you think about protection and availability, they're extremely related, right? If you don't protect your data, and it's very sensitive data, it will likely become a target for a threat actor. And threat actors are constantly looking at ways to get to your data. So protecting the data means putting it behind a firewall. It means encrypting the data. It means making sure that the permissions that individuals need to access the data are strong permissions, that you're using multi-factor authentication, et cetera, et cetera. And without protection, you risk data availability as well as other things, right? But data availability is a key premise for disaster recovery, business continuity, et cetera, et cetera. So that's where we have that convergence of, say, cybersecurity and business continuity DR, which is more of a very IT centric type of role or function. Then we have, compliance, retention, and disposition, which are very closely related. From a HIPAA perspective, there's certain data that needs to be kept in a certain fashion, certain types of PHI, certain types of PII, et cetera. There are other regulations in the financial services industry, same set of functional requirements. You must protect the data, keep it in a certain area, retain it in a certain fashion, make sure it's available. Let's say for GDPR purposes, where you have a data subject access request, you have to retain the information in a fashion that allows the data subject to be able to ask what information you have, correct the information that you have, delete the information, et cetera, et cetera. And these are all principles that are related to e-discovery, privacy, cybersecurity, and information technology. So, when I look at um, sort of a core function, sort of in the matrix, right? I'm looking at records management, and the tangential disciplines, in my estimate, provide a significant opportunity for individuals looking to enhance their careers, extend their careers, change their careers, because the disciplines are all tangentially related, right? There's a holistic perspective that I have. There are some people who are, traditionalists and purists and believe more in a very siloed distinction, line of demarcation between certain functions. That's not the approach that I take. The approach that I take is that it's you have to look at the information lifecycle holistically, because that's how data exists. It doesn't exist in a silo by function, right? All of the functions collaborate to protect that information, to make it viable for the business to use. And I think it's critically important to look at data in that particular in that way, right? Um, I will now move to the next slide. So I'm going to sort of pivot a little bit, and some people are scratching their heads, I'm sure, saying, where's he going with this? It's like, he mentioned something about, post-quantum cryptography. He mentioned, this convergence of various disciplines. And so I'm going to take you into the world of smart contracts, right? And there's a reason for this. Um, as we have looked at technology and the ability to store data in systems of record, we've looked at various tools or various repositories like Documentum, OpenText. These are tools that many enterprises use to store data in as close to an immutable fashion as possible, right? And the concept of data immutability and mutability is really important. It's important in terms of being able to adhere to the principles that I showed, the ARMA principles on the previous slide. And so, what technologies today provide us with immutability, right? And for those of you who are familiar with blockchain, um, you know that the whole blockchain architecture is one that is designed to provide a high degree of trust, right? And immutability around certain key aspects of data. Um, for years, for 4 years or so, right? For 4 years, at least 4 years, I struggled to understand how blockchain or any similar technologies could be used in the context of records management. And then I saw a particular architecture that is a distributed ledger technology. I'm not going to get into a lot of the details, but let's just, on a very high level, a distributed ledger is data is spread out across multiple nodes, right? And it does a couple of things. It allows you to have a high degree of redundancy around how your data is scattered and shared among a very highly trusted network, where the predicate of getting data into that network is the fact that once it's there, it's immutable. It cannot be altered or changed. And so you don't have to worry about anybody impacting the integrity of the data once it's stored in that environment. But blockchain is associated with cryptocurrency, and I don't, I don't own a crypto wallet. I don't know anything about cryptocurrency, but I know about data storage architecture. And so there was a specific type of architecture um, that allows for data to be protected, data to be stored and protected in a way that lends itself to immutability. And the way that that data is stored, it's stored in a fragmented way, so that if a threat actor were to infiltrate one of the nodes that are storing the data, they would never be able to recover the data. They would just have a tiny piece of nothingness. That having been said, I wanted to introduce this concept. I don't have enough time on this session to get into a great deal of detail, but if you do go to the CISA site and you do go to the NIST site and you read up on post-quantum cryptography readiness, and I highly, highly, highly recommend that you do, because it's going to be something that is increasingly a topic, given the fact that quantum computers have that ability to decrypt data, just as I've indicated, in a way that puts a lot of the infrastructure at risk. So what I'm talking about here is a smart contract. What is a smart contract? Smart contracts and distributed ledger technology work together. A smart contract is essentially nothing but a piece of code that has a workflow in it, right? So I'm introducing, for some of you, or maybe even most of you, a new vernacular, right? So anytime you hear the word smart contract, which has typically been associated with, cryptocurrency and crypto wallets and things of that nature, think about a smart contract that has this workflow in it. Okay. It's got nothing to do with cryptocurrency. It has everything to do with data that needs to be preserved pursuant to your records and information management policy, right? It has everything to do with the regulations that you are subject to, that require you to store information that is of a sensitive nature, PHI or PCI or whatever it happens to be, that is subject to regulation. A smart contract can help you manage that. So the technology that we have today uh, that can use these smart contracts to help you store and manage data in an immutable way so that it is protected from ransomware, so it is protected from any potential quantum decryption capability, because CISA has provided some algorithms that are quantum resistant. And we've actually at my company implemented those those algorithms to help protect sensitive data and do it in a way that provides for rapid recovery if there is an outage someplace, and do it in a way that has the highest degree of integrity, availability, and confidentiality. So I wanted to introduce this concept to you. Smart contracts can be used to manage records and will be used to manage records more effectively in the future. And this little workflow that you see here is directly related to those charts that I showed previously, where legal and office administration roles are going to be supplanted by AI, because AI relies on rules. And the rules that it gets to do things with data come from smart contracts. So I'm tying it together, hopefully in a way that makes a little bit of sense. Hope I haven't lost you. But I'm trying to pull it together in as short a time as possible to you know illustrate what the implications of the technology that's being brought to bear happen to be. Okay. Uh, let's see. So this is pretty self-explanatory as a workflow. You've got an employee that leaves. Do they have sensitive data? Yes. Then you're going to essentially put a smart contract together that goes out and grabs that data. It's going to log it in a quantum resistant database. It's going to route the data to a deep content classification engine that will categorize and classify it. If it is IP that's patentable, this is just a mocked up smart contract. You can actually build a smart contract to be as simple or as complex as you want it to be from a workflow perspective. If it has patentable IP based on the rules, send it to IP Council. If it doesn't, just store it pursuant to your records management policies. You can have a smart contract that has 1,000 decision points or two, such as this one, right? It's just a piece of code that listens and observes for certain conditions. And when those conditions are met, take an action. All right. Okay. So as I sort of cycle towards the latter part of the presentation, because I do want some time to have some discussion. It's really important to, and this is a very cyber-centric view here. There are tons and tons of opportunities for records managers to leverage their ability to categorize data, classify data, work with data, put policies and procedures in place. There are tons and tons of opportunities for records managers or people that are very centric to that discipline to move tangentially to the left, right, top, bottom of where they are. And I love the cyber model. This is a cyber model that I use. I have a couple of different models, but from, let's say, from a data loss prevention perspective, how does a records manager go from being a records manager to a DLP subject matter expert? Or how does a records manager work with the cybersecurity DLP folks? Easy, I'll tell you. Okay. Records managers, for the most part, have a very good understanding of the data within their enterprise. Records managers have a good understanding, generally speaking, of where, why, and the purpose, of information in the organization. The DLP folks, their job is to prevent certain types of data from leaving the organization. Okay. And DLP engines are primarily based on keywords. They are also based on behavioral characteristics. They're also based on non-keywords, natural language processing type criteria. So in order to protect an organization more effectively, it would be incumbent, in my estimate, on the DLP folks to work with the records management folks. And guess what? I built a program at a major company to do precisely that, right? To use the institutional knowledge that existed to help inform the security tools that monitor the transiting of data across ingress and egress points across firewalls, right? Um, and the same set of capabilities can be used if you have a Microsoft E5 license and you have the insider risk module, right? To see how data is being touched, how it's being accessed, how it's being used, how it's being stored, how it's being staged. Records managers can look at data and discern the importance, the criticality of that data based on some records category or record series or other characteristic in the taxonomy of the data within the organization to help inform security initiatives as well as privacy initiatives. Okay, so I'm highlighting this because sometimes when one looks at some of the charts and projections and prognostications, it looks kind of dire out there, but it's really not. Right? There's a ton of opportunity to use the capabilities that are actually taking jobs in some places to enhance your own careers, and that's kind of the takeaway that I wanted to leave us with. And with that, I'm going to pause and just open up for a few minutes of questions.
I
Hello,
have
David.
questions.
Okay, cool.
And I can do it in person. So,
Okay.
sort of that last point, right now, if you're doing a, inquiry or, a legal inquiry or a regulatory
Mhm.
inquiry, you have to go produce the data, right? You have to go get it, and
Right.
put it on a hard drive or whatever it is. Does this technology or potentially allow you to not like take your super secure encrypted immutable data and stick it on something that is exactly not what that is? Like, can you share it, or is how do you see that work in the future?
I see it working where there is a system of trust between a certain entity, and there are ways that you can establish that trust um, to share certain types of information under certain conditions. Um, there are lots of capabilities that exist today that allow for data sharing, but it's I mentioned the term provenance and lineage a little bit earlier, and um, if someone has eyeballs on glass, I mean that's the level of security that I envision coming down the pike. I envision sharing information with the SEC, for example, um, as one that does not necessitate the downloading of data. You're putting it on a device, a portable storage device, and then you're sending that off someplace. That is both inefficient and there's a certain amount of inherent risk. If to the extent you can share data um, directly from a immutable portal with someone who has the appropriate keys, the appropriate credentials, the appropriate authorization to access that information, you can actually store the fact that that person accessed the information on the same immutable ledger or immutable environment that stores that hash of the data that you just shared. So I see a paradigm rapidly being developed where every eyeball that every view of your data is a transaction, right? If you think about what I was discussing earlier, so distributed ledger technology, it's all about transactions. What is opening a document? That's a transaction that can and should be logged. right? What is editing a document? That's a transaction, right? So instead of taking transactions as it relates to, cryptocurrency and wallet, we're taking transactions as it relates to activities associated with data. So to answer your question, I see a future where every time a document is viewed by an external third party, that's a transaction that is immutably logged. Okay, that's immutably logged. I further see a transaction where a data subject that requests information about themselves, which you must provide pursuant to GDPR, CCPA, and the 6 other regs that have actually been codified, and the 30 other regs that are in committee, soon to be codified. I see the ability to track the fact that you have complied with a DASR as a
Mhm.
transaction, right? I see the fact that you have been asked to delete information as a transaction, right? And so the beautiful thing that forward thinking companies or forward thinking technologists are doing with immutable ledgers is they're creating a layer of mutability, but tracking the mutability in an immutable fashion. It's worth a conversation. It's pretty exciting stuff. It's different. I
Yeah.
will tell you that. So, but yeah, I get really excited when I talk about this stuff. So.
Okay, we have another question. For smart contracts, how are events captured that would trigger movement in the process flow?
It's essentially it's a workflow. The way smart contracts are built is you first build a workflow, right? And you have the way that blockchain or any distributed ledger, you have two two main families, right? You have blockchain, and then you have what's called distributed acyclic graph, which is far more powerful. You get far more speed, far more security, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so that latter category essentially uses nodes, right? And a node can be looked at as a tiny computer, a tiny ephemeral computer. And the workflow that you have in a smart contract is precisely that. It's a workflow that is executed by a node, right? And you in our model, our nodes can do different types of work, right? In other models, a node will have to do all of the work. There are algorithms that in sort of legacy models all have to be run on the same node. We have designed a structure where we have nodes that are doing different things in the workflow, and they can occur in parallel, right? So think of a smart contract as a set of instructions that you're going to give to a computer. It's a program. And think of the nodes as little computers that take pieces of the program and they execute on it. Okay, check for condition X. If condition X exists, then uh, cause this data to be moved, or cause the metadata of the data to be sent someplace for analysis, or cause the text of the data to be sent for classification, right? If a
Mhm.
string exists, do the same. So I hope I answered your question, but feel free to reach out to me, and I'm happy to spend a little time to walk you through some details.
And just to follow up on that question real quick, you have to pre-design your workflow. And I've been in project management. People are
Mhm.
notoriously bad at thinking of all of the permutations that will occur later on. If you need to change that flow, does it basically break the blockchain? You have to start over, or is there a way to say, oh no, I've gotten 50% of the way in there. Now I need to, instead of go to A, I need to go to B, or
Right. So there's a lot of flexibility that exists, but the first thing that you want to do is you want to do ample SDLC, UAT, software development lifecycle sort of testing. You don't need to go. It's not as though you're building an entire program, but you do have to have some level of rigor. in the process. And whatever process you build should already approximate some known process,
Mm.
right? Obviously, there are new things you can do, but when you think about automation, what is automation really? It's about applying technology and capabilities to create efficiencies around a particular function. So, what is needed for that function is often, in many instances, already well understood and well designed. And so, if you can take that paradigm and reduce it to smart contract code, which a lot of it is codeless, you can you can be more assured that the desired outcome is there. If you need to change something, then you can certainly do that.
Okay. I could go forever and ask questions, but are there any others? I'll ask one more, then maybe that'll trigger some other questions.
Okay.
Do you think that, there's kind of a mystery behind how maybe these smart contracts work? Do you think that perhaps there will be, independent audits or internal audits to go, yeah, this is doing what it's supposed to do, or making sure that it's, the controls are in place to make sure that it's doing what it's supposed to do and not something nefarious or anything like that?
Always. I mean, I don't see a situation where there will not be checks and balances in the organization. There are folks out there. I mean, one of my colleagues, Jeremy Lee, he's a smart contracts expert, and that's what he does. He works with companies to help them implement smart contract capabilities to automate certain workflows and work streams. Very, very important. And then there has to be some degree of validation. There has to be some, constant, how should I say, I shouldn't say constant, but regular auditing to ensure that the desired outputs are exactly what you're supposed to be seeing. But again, keep in mind, as I mentioned previously, a lot of what you're doing is based on an existing functional requirement, and what you're doing is you're using that smart contract to automate the process in a particular environment, right? Which is where you're having that higher degree of confidentiality, integrity, data availability, transparency, accountability, all that sort of stuff.
Okay. And then we had another question. With respect
Mhm.
to the title of this presentation, can you clarify how this framework applies Agile principles?
Right. So when you think about agile development, when you think about having sprints and scrums, and when you think about having epics and tasks and stories and things of that nature, at the end of the day, when you implement a capability, it is, in my estimate, best to do so in a way that follows an agile approach, right? So, um, having regular scrums, for example, to discuss a process build activity is something that I've been doing for a number of years, right? When you think of agile and waterfall and different methods that are used to build software, I'm not a coder, right? But I use agile methods to get me through the actions and the cycles that are necessary to get to a process that is built and is vetted. And to get to that process, you often need to bring different subject matter experts together. You need to bring in coders. You need to maybe have a regular scrum meeting with in sprints to get through your design process in a timely fashion.
Okay, that kind of addresses my point earlier. It's like you can't think of everything at the beginning, so don't use the waterfall methodology.
Right.
All right. All right. Anyone else? We're right about on time.
Okay. And please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to to connect with anybody who's interested in learning more about how certain technologies can improve ransomware resistance, how you can become post-quantum cryptography ready. Because I know once you go to the CISA site and you go to the NIST site, that's going to be a question that comes up. How do I make sure my organization is post-quantum cryptography ready? So we can help.
All right. And thank you for this very engaging presentation. And I'm going to practice saying post-quantum cryptography readiness for the rest of the day. See you.
All right. All right, David. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
Everybody, thank you, Arma. Nice to connect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.